Hello. This album that you see here, Expose 67, was recorded in 1967 by the brothers-in-law in Canada. That's Larry Rio and Bob Lee and myself, Alec Somerville. 1967, that's 50 years ago. And but this album was going to be put out for Canada's 100th birthday, which of course was 1867 to 1967. And the picture you see on the cover is a facsimile of the famous painting of the Fathers of Confederation, and they've stuck our heads on there, and Larry's guitar and my banjo. And because there was only three of us, they put our heads on there twice, to fill it out, I suppose. Anyway, we were very happy with it. I had written 11 songs for this album, and out it went. And then, whammo, the company that published this, Canint Music, which was the publishing arm of Arc Records in Toronto, were hit with a suit by Ludlow Music from New York. Up there in their 17th floor in downtown New York, they had become aware of this and they took exception to it, and they hauled Canint Music into the Exchequer Court of Ottawa. Their beef was that the lead song, which I wrote, "This Land Is Whose Land," infringed upon a copyright that they claim they held for Woody Guthrie, who wrote a song, as everyone knows, called "This Land Is Your Land." Now, I'm going to put this album down, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Woody Guthrie and me. That sounds a bit pretentious, but it isn't. Woody Guthrie was one of my heroes. He was a folk troubadour. He wrote the truth, as far as I was concerned. He and I came from similar ends of the political spectrum. We both lived through that gut-wrenching Great Depression. Him in the Dust Bowl of America, me in a grimy Lancashire cotton town. And we both knew what hardship was. And we had both fought our way up, and we both started to write songs. So there's some similarities. There's a bit of dissimilarity in that Woody chose the direct knock him down, punch him in the face approach, which he did very well, and I used humour. Because as well as Woody Guthrie, I'd been listening to Tom Lehrer and Flanders and Swan and people like that, who were using humour and satire and, most important of all, parody to get their point across. So when I found out that a group of folkies in Toronto had started to put out Woody's "This Land Is Your Land," and they changed all the American names, the mountains, the lakes, the rivers, whatever, that he had included in that very fine song, and they'd replace them with Canadian ones. And they would introduce that as "This Land Is Your Land," Canadian version. As I wrote on the liner notes for that album, if anything ever showed Canada as a subsidiary, that was it. And I was disgusted with it, and I still am. And so I wrote a song of my own, and it's called "This Land Is Whose Land?" It's parody. But it's not parody. It's not aimed at Woody Guthrie, who incidentally died right about the time that album came out. Not aimed at him at all. It was aimed at this idiotic approach to, if you want, Canadian folk music. I think it deserved better than that. I thought so then, and I think so now. In the meantime, of course, parody and satire have become a real defence. But in those days they weren't, not in Canadian law, and the result of the case in court was that the judge ordered that the album be pulled, no more sold, that's it. They knew then, and I didn't know until last week, that the folk group from Toronto had made a deal with Ludlow Music in New York in 1959, which gave them the sole right to sing and record and put about this Canadian version. I didn't know that. So maybe that's what made the judge decide the way he did. He said, you can't separate Mr. Guthrie's words from Mr. Guthrie's music. Well, we'll come to that right now. It wasn't Mr. Guthrie's music at all. Back in the 1870s, a man named Philip Bliss wrote a hymn called My Redeemer. He was killed in a train wreck at Ashtabula, Ohio, with his wife. And in the wreckage, they found his luggage, and in his luggage there was the draft of this hymn, My Redeemer. They took that back to the place in Chicago where he worked for an evangelist music publishing firm. And a new man in the place, James McGranahan, set it to music. So there we are. And they performed it there, and it was later, not much later, recorded on an Edison cylinder. It has a verse and a chorus, and a verse and a chorus, and a verse and a chorus. We won't bother about the verse, but I'm going to tell you what the chorus is. It goes like this: da 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 da, da 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 da, da 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 da, da 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 da, da 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 da. Is that enough? Have you heard that somewhere before? Well, I have. And it had words to it, which were, this land is your land. So it's my contention that Woody borrowed that, adapted it. I've done the same thing. For my song Onward the Establishment, I borrowed Elgar's Hope and Glory. And for my water pollution song, I borrowed Dvorak's Humoresque. It's done all the time because, like Woody Guthrie, the importance to me of my work is the words. That's the message. That's the message that we want to get across as troubadours. The music, well, there we are. So anyway, I'm now going to sing my composition, This Land is Whose Land, set to the adapted chorus of My Redeemer, written by James McGranahan in about 1880, and certainly in the public domain. So here we go. This is for you, Bob and Larry, and Ken Warrener, who was the A&R man at Arc Sound. And it's also Happy Birthday, Canada. First came the Norsemen, all Scandinavian, extremely coarse men, mostly unshaven. They wandered inland and called it Vinland. This land ain't made for you and me. This land ain't your land. This land ain't my land. This far from Norway, we just want dry land. The natives love it and they can shove it. This land ain't made for you and me. The early French had extreme persistence, despite the Indians' combined resistance. With righteous feeling, they started stealing this land that's made for you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land, this voyageur of Fleur de Lis land, so populated and separated. This land that's made for you and me. Next came the English and the salty henchmen, who started fighting with all those Frenchmen through this spot of bother. They told each other, I say this land's made for you and me, old chap. This land is your land, this land is my land, this fish and chips and steak and kidney pie land, this land of Tory, of hope and glory, this land that's made for you and me. While French and English were busy crying, US investors were quietly buying. We didn't spot it